All right. Well, thanks for tuning into another episode of the Why Influence podcast. Today we got an awesome guest. His name is Rob, and he works at TubeBuddy, which happens to be the sponsor for our podcast and community. And today he just spoke at our meetup, and he shared his process for uploading YouTube videos from start to finish, and how he's using SEO research to sort of combine that with YouTube uh, presence. But first of all, I just want to say thank you, Rob, for taking the time to not only speak at the meetup but also come here on the podcast today.
Yeah, Jeremy, of course, man. Love hanging out. You got an awesome community over there, and yeah, always down. It's good to catch up. Love what you're doing, man, and all the content you're pushing out there and helping everyone, kind of create content and build an audience. So yeah, happy and excited for the conversation.
Nice. Well, if you don't mind, I'm gonna share my screen real quick and sort of just do a little bit of an introduction here. So
Sure.
here's Rob's YouTube channel. He's got almost 3,000 YouTube subscribers. He's gotten that rather quickly. I think you got your first thousand in your first year, and then it's been growing pretty fast since then. You've got about 130,000 views. You talk a lot about live streaming, YouTube, obviously, things like that. As far as on Social Blade, I hope you don't mind. I'm pulling up your analytics
Yeah,
here.
yeah. I love it. I love it.
You can see, your subscribers are on a growth curve here. You're getting, anywhere from 50 to 100 subscribers a day, it looks like. And your views, you're up to about, almost 5,000 views a day. That's amazing.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey for sure. Really started taking YouTube seriously about a year ago, and just trying to apply all the things that all the experts are sharing and testing them out if it works for me. And it's been fun to kind of grow a channel and go through that. And but yeah, it's been good. Big learning curve for sure. There's so many things, and you have to be willing to really test and fail, with new ideas and strategies. And, some of them will stick, and then some of them you have to kind of let go and say it doesn't work for you. But yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun doing it.
Nice, yeah, and you're pretty active on other social medias. I mean, I see you a lot on LinkedIn, engaging on there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great to see that as well. So it's you're on multiple places as usual.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's yeah, I mean, I just love to build community. Outside of, if I wasn't doing, if I wasn't a TubeBuddy, I'd be, doing something to build community somewhere. And so yeah, LinkedIn is a great place. I mean, that's kind of where I started actually creating content before really taking YouTube seriously, was LinkedIn, and creating videos just for LinkedIn, and building a personal brand on there, before I kind of started thinking about YouTube.
nice.
Yeah,
So we'll be diving into that journey here shortly.
sure.
But to start, I'm curious. Does like a story come to mind for, you're creating all this content, you're sharing things out there, maybe like an unintended consequence, like somebody that you've impacted in a way that you didn't expect, that maybe reached out to
Mm,
you and it's like, hey, this made this impact on me. Does a
yeah.
story come to mind for you related to that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, man. It's a really good question. That's a big part of like why I try to build a community on YouTube. Yes, on YouTube, but like outside of YouTube. There's on YouTube, you have a community tab, right? Like if you get to 1,000 subscribers, you unlock the community tab, which lets you kind of post things and stuff like that on your channel, like kind of like a Facebook feed. You also have your comments and stuff, but I feel like, that's one thing with YouTube, is that there is a community that wants to be there and wants to build, and it is building. But I've decided to create a private Facebook group and also have a Slack channel, because I want to engage with, the people, the subscribers on my channel more closely, and get to know them better and get to know their stories. Because you'll see comments, like every now and then I'll see a comment about, because my content is all about, how to live stream, how to create videos, how to build an audience. And so every now and then I'll get a comment about, like, how, they watched a bunch of my videos, somebody watched a bunch of my videos, and they're able to launch a show or go live or do something like that they didn't want to do or didn't expect they could do. And so, but then I'm kind of limited, right? And so that's why I built a community. Now, yeah, I mean, I can't think of one specific story, but in our community, there's lots of them, people that are, really afraid to get in front of the camera and stuff like that. And so I guess the way that I come off, and it's totally cool with me, is that I'm just a regular guy and I'm no different than anyone else. I'm no more special than anyone else that's watching and tuning into my content. I'm just a regular guy that's like a little bit more maybe willing to, make mistakes in front of a camera than others. And I think to some degree, that's encouraging for people, I'm not super polished, and all of my videos from like a year and a half, 2 years ago are still on the channel. You can go watch them and you can kind of then see like, I was using a webcam and I had bad lighting and, I was stuttering on my words and stumbling on them and, and then progressively, trying to do more things, trying to put myself out there and test new things and just create content that's maybe not perfect. It gets better and better, right? So showing up better, lights, all that stuff, but also like, YouTube has taught me a lot about like public speaking and creating content that's engaging and listening to the audience. Doing live stream interviews like the one that we're doing now is helped me to not talk over other people, in a conversation. There's a lot of little things like that. So it's always good to hear those like comments and read those comments from people that they'll say, yeah, thanks for this. I didn't know you could do this or that, and your videos have helped.
Yeah. Even just in the meetup right before this, we heard several pieces of feedback there for just some of the tips that you shared.
Yeah.
So let's say you meet someone that's like, I want to start a YouTube channel. I don't have anything yet. Like, what's some of your biggest advice for like a new YouTuber or aspiring YouTuber that's like just starting out? Like, what's some of your biggest advice that you'd give this person?
Yeah. If you're starting from like really, really like no channel, nothing, like obviously create your content, create your channel. Think of one main topic, that you want to talk about, right? If you want to be it's like, if you're really serious about growing a YouTube channel, you have to be quite focused. Like eventually you want to be very focused with your channel. If you look at any channels out there that are really growing steadily, they're very focused. Like, what that channel is about. You can probably put it into a couple words. Like if you say like, hey, what's this channel about? You're like, Facebook ads. What's this channel about? Yoga for seniors or something. What's this channel about? Productivity for, millennials. You can usually do that, right? That's a really successful channel. Like, YouTube knows what that channel is about. So, but in the beginning, it's hard, right, Jeremy? Like, you're like, oh, well, I want to do this and this, and I enjoy this and this. And so, you do have to have an idea of what you want to talk about. But then feel free to test it out, right? Talk about this, like let's say, talk about, Instagram, talk about IGTV, if that's your space. Instagram, IGTV, stories, and then just like try to see what people are curious to, what people are tuning in for, what they're watching, what they're watching the most. Take a look at what in the analytics as you upload more videos. What are the search terms that people are looking for to find your videos? That usually gives you an indication. And then listen to the comments, right? Listen to the comments. What questions are people asking? And then by listening to the questions from your viewers, then that helps you create more videos that that they're going to tune in for. So for my channel, I literally just started like reading comments and then, okay, that's a good question. Let me see if I can make a video. Because if one person is wondering about it, there's probably, a handful of other people that are wondering the same thing, but just haven't actually asked. So, you have to make sure that obviously it's not a video that's competitive or a topic that's competitive on YouTube. You got to put it through the keyword research, but just like listen to your community, listen to the audience. So that's what I would say, Jeremy, is like, if you're starting, like try to decide on a topic, right? Don't say like, well, I enjoy cooking and coffee and skateboarding. It's just not going to fit into one channel. Actually, maybe it will, but like, it's not going to fit into one channel. You got to pick one and then go deep into that topic. And then just start creating, have fun, like always, like, YouTube, just like anything, if it stops becoming fun, it becomes actual work, although YouTube is work, if you were serious about it. But then if you're not having fun, it's going to show. You're going to burn out. You're going to lose interest in your passion for creating content. But just have fun, have fun and try different things.
Yeah, I love that. That's a lot of advice sort of crammed together. So I'm just going to recap a little bit of it.
Sure.
But you should be able to clearly articulate what your channel's about in a couple words, because that'll help you stay concise. And even when you spoke at the meetup, you were sharing how you found like you have certain topics that you talk on, and if they don't, like, you gave the example of your playlists. Like if you upload a video and you can't find a playlist that it matches to, it might be like outside of the box of what it is that you're trying to share on. And then obviously sharing something you're passionate about, because you need to be able to keep going. It's a lot of work. Just curious, as an example, what would you say is your channel's about from the concise standpoint?
Yeah, so my channel is about helping people that know marketing how to create videos. That's typically how I look at it, because a lot of people that watch my videos are marketers, or they have knowledge about marketing. They just don't understand how videos work, I guess, like if that's the right way to say it. So they just don't understand how to create videos, what the format of the videos would be, how do I go live, how do I repurpose my content. So that's kind of who I always think when I'm talking to the camera, I'm making a tutorial, I'm talking to somebody that is kind of like me, like they like me from, let's say, like a year or two ago, where I know marketing, I know sales funnels, I know, like, conversions and all that stuff, split testing and all these terms and, concepts for marketing, but I don't necessarily know how videos can play into that. I want to make videos work. I want to use it because I see it work for everyone else, but how do I do that? So that's kind of who I'm talking to, people that are, they're bright, experts, professionals, but they just don't know how to put videos into their mix.
Yeah. So as you can see, like Rob just like chose something very niched down that he can speak on very clearly and articulate that. So I think that's something to strongly consider when you're starting YouTube channels, to make sure that you can articulate that persona is of the person that is tuning into your content.
Yeah.
Awesome. So as far as an experienced influencer goes, or experienced YouTuber, let's say you meet someone who's been doing YouTube for a while. Like, what's some of your secret sauce? Like, what's something that you're doing different than like the average YouTuber that you attribute some of your success to?
I would probably say two things. One is I'm very particular about making sure that I respond to comments within 24 to 48 hours. It's something that I've started, even, again, going back, I just love community. And I feel like, again, the way that YouTube works, and really any social media works, if you have someone that's taking the time to comment, and it's a question, it's just like a thank you, like, respond to them, let them know that you're around, right? That you're there. That brings them back to your channel, right? As far as like even strategy wise, it just actually brings them back to the channel. And then I usually, answer the question if they have a question, and then ask another question. I send it back to them. It's kind of like tennis, right? So that way they will then hopefully answer my question, and we're going to have a conversation. So that's the first thing. I would say, like, probably, I mean, I don't know the stats, Jeremy, but like a lot of YouTube creators, they don't really respond to comments. And I see this all the time, right? The second thing I would say over the last, I would say, year and a half, with the growth of my channel, is collaborations. Never been afraid of like competition. I kind of see that there's enough business, there's enough views and all, there's enough, there's an ocean of, people that would be interested in your content. And everyone, I look at myself, everyone will consume from multiple channels, right? So, somebody that's interested in, growing their YouTube channel, they're not just watching one person, they're watching multiple. You're watching Nick Nimmin, and Roberto Blake, and Daryl Eves, and Trina Little, and Diana Gladney, like, you're watching multiple people. So, very early on, I started doing a lot of collaborations, live stream interviews on a weekly basis. And that's been a huge driver for new subscribers, new views, growing my audience, and even looking at analytics. In analytics, there's different things that you can do in there. If you really dive in and really nerd out, Jeremy, like there's things called groups in analytics. So you can group your videos into different groups. And I came to the conclusion with the help of another gentleman named Joshua Wethington, who's a smart YouTube strategist, that the live stream content on my channel, the interview content, has helped to drive views to the uploaded content and vice versa. So yeah, I would say definitely interview content and collaborations have been huge for me. And I always tell people, like, try to find ways to collaborate with people that are in your space. Don't be afraid. It's not competition, so their audience is your audience, and your audience combined would love to see you both come together and talk about, whatever topic it is that you're an expert in. They just love to be a fly in the wall and listen in on that, and then even ask you both questions during the live stream. So don't be afraid to do collaborations. So those two things, the comments and collaborations.
Yeah, I hear the comments a lot, especially for YouTube. It's really important. So I'm glad you do that. I do that as well. I try to reply to every comment.
Yeah.
And then collabs. Yeah, that's great. So that's sort of what we're doing here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Collaborated live stream here. We've got a couple questions that came in from E, but what I want to do is sort of dive into your story real quick.
Sure.
For a bit, and then we'll try to tackle some of these questions.
Sure.
So let's talk about like the beginning for you. You talked about how you sort of started on LinkedIn earlier in our conversation here, but I want to know, like, where was the beginning of when you started sharing in like a larger capacity? Like what did the beginning look like for you, or when approximately was that?
Yeah, the beginning, I guess, with like this whole world of like, public speaking and live streaming and videos and YouTube and all this stuff. I would say it's probably about 2016. I was working at a company for probably 4 or 5 years, a company called Thinkific. Right before TubeBuddy, I was working there, and I did a variety of things. I was on the marketing team. I was taking care of the community, which we had like a private Facebook group. I was on the partnership team for a number of years as well. And so, 2016, I started to basically, I got handed the community, which is a private Facebook group. And I started taking care of an online community of entrepreneurs and course creators. That's what Thinkific does. It's an online course platform. So try, learning how to.
Quick on that, were you sharing as you as an individual, like Rob, or were you sharing on behalf of the company when you were managing that?
Good question. Yeah, no, it was, so the private community, there was no brands allowed. And so it was only personal, like Facebook profile. So so I showed up as Rob. Yeah, I mean, very clearly I was like, I work for Thinkific. I'm the community manager here. And so, I showed up as Rob. So really got into the mindset of like, okay, how do we engage the community? What makes a community exciting and interesting to be a part of? Using videos, using questionnaires, using, live streaming, bringing guests on, started to understand like, hey, people are here not just for this brand, but like people are here to learn, right? So let's bring on partners. Like, why not? There's partners out there. It's not going to hurt. It doesn't hurt our brand. It's just like, we win because we are giving to the partner we're showcasing them, giving them a platform to eventually get some potential clients from, because we have a bunch of users here. And then the users, the people that are in the community, are also getting so much value because they're getting to learn from experts that they wouldn't normally have access to, or at least free access to. So that really started to, that's kind of where that really started to develop. And then getting to be able to grow those relationships with those partners, those expert influencer partners, that would open doors. They would be like, hey, Rob, thanks for doing that. Would you guys be interested to join us on our podcast? Or, we have a summit coming up. Would you guys like to speak? So then that would open doors to those, those avenues to then be exposed and get to know a new community, right? And so that's kind of where that started, Jeremy. And I'm like, okay, well, that
So
that
was
didn't
that
cost any.
you? Was that you like being asked to be speaking at these events, or was it like send someone from Thinkific on your behalf kind of thing?
Yeah, it would be a combination. So if it was like, and most of the time they would just say, "Hey, Rob, can you do that? Can you just do that?" So most of the time, I would be the one that would end up going to do those things, which is awesome. Like that, we're like, "Hey, that didn't cost anything. Everybody wins. Let's just, so let's do this more." And so there was probably around like a year or so into doing that. There's a guy named Eric Sue and Neil Patel, big marketing guys out of LA. And they had a podcast. They were doing a daily podcast. And they're like, "Hey, Rob, like, you want to join our podcast? Like, we do daily, just like we do on Facebook Live." So I'm like, "Okay, cool. Like, what do you want me to do?" They're like, "Just go watch the podcast from your phone when we go live." This is 2017. I didn't know about like, Restream or on any of these like platforms to live stream. They weren't using it either. So they would just go live on their phone. And they're like, "Okay, we'll watch it on their phone. And then when we see you watching it, we'll invite you as a guest through the Facebook app." I'm like, "All right, let's do that." So then, so I did that. And then it was just a mess because like I was sideways on the phone and stuff. It was just crazy. But like, that was like the first time that I went live on someone else's show. And then we're like, "Hey, these guys do this on a daily basis, like literally every single day. They do a live stream, they record it, they turn it into a podcast." We're like, "Well, if they can do that, like maybe we can do it once a week." And so that was basically the starting point of us saying like, "Hey, let's do this once a week." We would use Zoom with, I think it was Restream, or maybe just Zoom direct to Facebook. And then we just started doing like a weekly live stream. We would, invite one of our expert partners, and that was it. That was like the beginning of, live streaming regularly. And so that opened a bunch of doors for Thinkific and partnerships, and then opened up a bunch of doors for me personally in my career and just getting
And
to
you were
know
the
a bunch.
host?
Yeah, I was the host with another colleague of mine. And it was just a good time, just casual conversations about, what they're doing, what they're up to, like kind of like what we're doing right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that journey. So
Yeah.
you sort of jumped in by becoming a community manager. You started off with sort of like maybe text primarily for managing the Facebook group, and then you started getting opportunities to speak at places. So you got to get in front of audiences, and then you grew into doing some like online video with live streaming, and it's just sort of grew from there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what was it like the first time that like when you got handed this community? I'm trying to gauge like your comfort level with all this. Like, yeah. How were you feeling with that?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty nervous. I mean, it was a lot of pressure for me. Obviously you're representing a company, you're representing a brand. Um, so yeah, I mean, I was pretty nervous. Everything you said could be magnified. It's like basically like, "Hey, Rob said you could do this," or like, so everything was like I was making sure, and we run it through the right people. Like, "Hey, can I reply to this?" I mean, eventually, it became second nature. But yeah, just like anything, I was super nervous, Jeremy. Like, you don't want to drop the ball and be the guy that causes a huge scandal, and like reply the wrong way or something, So,
Yeah.
yeah. I was pretty nervous.
Cool. So that evolved into you eventually sharing like on more of a personal level, on a bigger level. Is that when you migrated to more LinkedIn sharing, or?
Yeah. Yeah. So I started doing some partnership work, managing the relationships, obviously from like the community. I became sort of, the point of contact with a lot of the partners. We would DM each other on Facebook, and they would have my number and, things like that. And so that transformed into more of a partnership role for me. And so LinkedIn became the place. Like we were looking for to connect with thought leaders, content creators, YouTube obviously, but like at the time, YouTube just seemed like such an ocean. It was just like, I don't know how to tackle this like space. There's so many influencers here. So we're like, okay, well, let's go to LinkedIn. So I started to build my LinkedIn profile, started to connect with thought leaders on LinkedIn, private messaging and starting conversations, and started creating a lot of content on LinkedIn, really started to enjoy it, creating videos because LinkedIn videos just came out. And so I was like, okay, let's record some native uploaded videos, right? So I'd upload them natively directly to LinkedIn. And I started to grow my personal brand there, which is great. And I always tell, even if you're working in a brand, even if you're an employee, if you're working for a company, you should build your own brand. It does nothing but good things for you as a personal, for your personal career, your personal brand, but also for the company that you're working for, right? And this isn't always the case, because some companies are not super open to that idea, right? They're a little bit, threatened by the idea of like their employees building their personal brand and maybe getting poached or recruited. But I mean, if your company's good, solid, that's something that I would suggest. And I know that's not your question, Jeremy.
No,
But
this is a good topic, and I
yeah,
talk a lot about that. So I do want to dive more into that, and it's
yeah,
probably a good segue for that.
yeah, sure.
So like I talk to a lot of thought leaders and influencers, and we talk a lot about personal branding. Part of the reason why I started my podcast was personal brand reasons, as well as self-development, to like overcome my barriers to sharing. Because I started a business, built it, sold it. So when I sell a business, the brand goes with it. And I've got another business now. I've grown about 200,000 social followers for. And then I was reflecting on it, and I was like, oh, when that's gone, I got to start from scratch again.
Yeah,
So let's talk a little bit about that personal brand for a moment.
sure.
Seeing as like someone can gain value for building a personal brand as like in their career, or as a business owner or entrepreneur or creator, like how's that how's that beneficial, like and how does somebody negotiate to make it okay, I guess would be a good question to ask to you, because you might have seen some cases there, like if someone's in an organization or a company and they're saying, hey, hold off on that personal brand thing. Do you have any advice for that? Sorry, that sort of evolved into like
That's a,
question,
yeah. No, it's a hard question to even try to express. I totally get what you're asking though. Like how do you like approach your, somebody above you, whoever you're answering to say like, hey, it's okay for me to do this. So the first thing is if you work for a brand that is not comfortable for you to build your own personal brand, then that's just something you have to think about, right? If you work for like Facebook or Google, like you'll see like there's speakers. If you go to conferences and stuff, there are speakers that are represented there from Google, Facebook, Microsoft. See them all the time. Instagram. John Uche is a good friend of mine. He's a product manager at Instagram. He was at Vid Summit last year, for example, he was interviewed. People would interview him and stuff, and he has to run it through. He has to run it through legal and all those things. He needs to know what questions you're going to ask him. But, he has a personal brand. Like he goes and he's himself, and he works for a company, and that's great. Right. And so that brings people back to IGTV. Like that's what he was talking about. He's like, hey, the power of vertical videos, for example. So it's a great example. If you're working for a brand that's that's not comfortable, like you just have to kind of think about that. Like why would they be threatened? You have to like, you also have to look at yourself like, oh, are you in it because you are building something so that you can kind of, with a plan of like, hey, I'm going to get out of here. I just want to like leverage this position, build enough, and then I'm going to get out of here. That's also something you have to check your heart on, right? Like, is that like,
right.
You have to check your heart. Like, is that your goal? And if it is, it's going to be very transparent. It's going to come out, it's going to be very easy to kind of read. But, for me, I built my personal brand with the sole, like really all I wanted to do was like, it would just open doors for my current position, right? I wasn't looking to start my own business. I was just looking because I'm in a place where like, okay, partnerships And so if you're like me, if you're looking to do collaborations and stuff, sometimes if you represent a brand, it actually closes doors, right? Like there's some communities and events and conferences and networks where if you show up as like the guy from TubeBuddy, that might open doors, right? Like, hey, I'm Rob from TubeBuddy. Oh, okay, yeah, we know TubeBuddy. Awesome, cool. But then there's going to be some places where they're going to be like, oh, TubeBuddy, like that's a company. Everyone here is they're just like solopreneurs, and we don't have a big brand here. Or they may see it as like, hey, this is a brand. It's an opportunity to like, that means dollar bills, right? Like, it's like dollar signs, like, oh, you're a brand. Okay, cool. Like, let's do this thing, but it's going to cost you this much. So if you have a personal brand, you can read the situation and then enter it into it, either as the guy from the brand or the lady from the brand, or just yourself. And there's a lot of places where it was better for me to just say, hey, no, I'm just Rob. I'm a content creator, create stuff on LinkedIn. Yeah, I work for Thinkific at the time, or hey, yeah, I work at TubeBuddy, but like, yeah, I create my own content. I'm just like you. I'm just trying to build my own content, my own channel, right? And very true. It's very true. So that's the importance of that, So whether you're like, and this isn't just for marketing guys, it's for people that are in product development or developers. There's conferences about Java and React and all these other conferences. There's product management conferences. There's all sorts of conferences. Culture and people that work in HR. There's tons of conferences just for HR or community management. So be your own personal brand within a company, and then you'll have the opportunity to either speak at those events or be highlighted in those events, connect with those people, and that will help you. I know that there's a lot of people that I know that are in HR, and they built their own brands. You'll see them on LinkedIn, sharing like, hey, 5 best ways to maintain a company culture during COVID, while working remotely, things like that, right? And that brings them up. I'm like, hey, yeah, cool. This person knows their stuff. Oh, by the way, they work at Salesforce. So if you guys are interested in a really good company culture, check out some of our openings over here at Salesforce, right? So having a personal brand just does nothing but good. So that's where I stand on that.
No, that's awesome. That's great, great feedback, and I completely agree with that. So just a little bit of a follow up there, because we're talking about your journey here. Is
sure.
You started your personal brand, relatively recently, and was there anything holding you back from starting your personal brand earlier? Was it maybe just self awareness of not knowing that it mattered, or was it like you had to give yourself permission to do it? Like, what did it look like for you to like make the decision to make that personal brand?
Yeah, probably a combination. I definitely should have started it way earlier. I think it's a combination of things. Like, definitely one thing was like the whole imposter syndrome thing. I was working with people that had massive audiences and ebooks and courses and retreats and all this stuff. I was like, okay, well, I don't like, where do I start here? Like, I might as well just be a marketing guy, and just working for the brand. But it was just a matter of like just jumping in. So I would probably say that's probably the biggest thing that kind of made me, and also probably just the fact that I wasn't aware that it needed to be done, or that there would be a lot of benefit to building your own personal brand. The term personal brand in itself was thrown around a lot, and I remember hearing it, but I didn't really know what it meant. Like, what do I do with personal brand? Like, what is a personal brand? Like, do I need to make a logo? Do I need to do, do I need to make like, business cards? Like, what is a personal brand, right? So just not understanding what it is, that it's just showing up, creating content. That's your personal brand. Having channels, that is yours. That's a personal brand. And it doesn't have to be separate from, if you're an employee and you're listening, it doesn't have to be separate. Like, you can't hide that you work at Google or Facebook or, whatever company you're at. You can't hide that, but it's what you do. It's what you do. What are your expertise? and what can you highlight, what can you share, from your experience. So yeah, I would say those two things: imposter syndrome and just not understanding, where to
Yeah.
start.
All right. I guess just as a quick follow up to that, do you mind
Sure.
sharing how you overcame the imposter syndrome for the personal brand?
Yeah. There's really nothing. I would just say, like, I just started to say yes to the, like, our CEO, the previous CEO, or the CEO at Thinkific. He once said, like, because I shared, like, hey, we got invited to do this interview, this collaboration, and he says, just like whenever you get an opportunity like that, like people invite you to do things or to speak at events or to do summits or interviews, just say yes. Like, even if you think like there's no way, why am I doing this? Like, why would I be invited to this? I'm not worthy. Just it's like, just say yes, and then by the time you do it, then you'll figure out. So that's kind of like very general advice, but that's kind of it. Like, there was no lack of invites to do certain things, or but I just started saying yes. Just say yes, sure, I'll do it. Like, when? Send me a calendar, let's do it. And so just more repetition, more practice. And then that eventually started to build, and I didn't really realize it at the time in the early days, but it would it built the portfolio. When people would see me on, like, different podcasts or live streams or events, then it sort of built a portfolio, and then people would be they built more awareness for, like, the things that I was sharing and who I was. And so then I would get more invites, and it kind of just snowballed from there. So that's probably it. I just decided I'd say yes. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's similar to how I started too. I just sort of had to at first discover it that it mattered, and then give myself permission to go for it, which is similar to the yes thing.
yeah.
So you're building a personal community with your personal brand. Uh, do you mind talking about maybe where you're at with that, what that community is like, and where you sort of see the future of that going?
Yeah. So I, so YouTube is my primary content, where, create the most content. From there, I really have two really distinct communities, I guess, that I'm fostering. One is a private Facebook group, which has started like 2 years ago, and really it was a Facebook group for me to just keep in touch and continue building relationships with people that were like partners, people that I was collaborating with and stuff like that. Because as you scale, that's the hardest thing to scale is relationships. You can only manage so many relationships and have so many, email threads and, DM threads going on, right? So decided to build a Facebook group. And then the other community that I have is for my Patreon, and that's a smaller group. It's on Slack, and so I get to engage and on a daily basis. So that's really where my focus is. I like smaller groups like that, and so those are the two. I see them moving forward. Like, I see them both growing. Just the way that they are, and just continuing to grow that. With the Slack community, I'm really trying to think of ways to make sure that they are getting as much value from me as possible. And it's a community where, like, obviously it's for Patreon supporters, but I mean, my Patreon, I set it up for, like, there's multiple tiers, I think, from like $1 to $9 a month. So it's not something I'm building to retire off of. I'm actually putting all of the Patreon, you know, I guess it's called donations. I don't know. All the Patreon donations, like, I'm just going to donate it at the end of the year to a good cause. It's really just a way for
Nice.
me to, yeah, it's just a way for me to, again, build community, so that's really all I'm looking forward, to do with that. So yeah, I just continue with that. And, mentioning it in different content and stuff like that, but that's really it. Just continue to let it grow on its own.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. So if you don't mind sharing from just like a high level, whatever you're comfortable with,
Yeah.
do you mind sharing like your your income sources as an
Sure.
influencer and a thought leader in your space?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess outside of like my TubeBuddy salary, with like as a content creator, yeah, affiliates is definitely one. Is probably like I would probably say, yeah, like the primary revenue channel as a content creator. So affiliates for live streaming tools, all the different tools that I use. So that's probably that. For my YouTube channel, every now and then we'll do like some sponsored content with different brands and different tools that I talk about on a regular basis. So those two. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, and that's really it for me. That's it. I don't have merch or anything like that. I am building a course, right? So I'm building a course which will be a sponsored course. So for a lot of people, the idea of that is kind of new, but basically it's a course that's going to be about a specific topic, and I'm going to be bringing in a sponsor to pay for it up front. And then what that does is then I'm going to give the course away for free. And then as I go through the course, there will be some places where they need to get different tools, different software. So there'll be some affiliate things with that inside. But that's another revenue channel as a content creator. So yeah, I would say that those. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, as far as public speaking and like summits and stuff, I'm not doing any charge. I'm not charging for that. But if you're a content creator, and depending on the event, that's another thing that I know content creators will charge for, is to for like appearances and speaking. Definitely a huge revenue possibility there as well. So yeah, that's it. Those are it.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing. It's great to hear, how different people are generating income to
Yeah.
sustain the lifestyle. And I know you got your, your full-time
Yeah.
gig that sort of helps quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's good to see like the diversity of things that you're thinking about moving forward.
Yeah.
So before I open the floor for just saying like the best way to find you and to message you and things like that, knowing that a lot of the listeners here today are people that are trying to overcome barriers to start, or maybe overcome barriers to grow bigger. And I've got a couple questions that have come in the chat I'll ask after
Sure.
this, but do you have any last words for our listeners here today?
Yeah. I would just say I mean, we talked about a lot about personal brand. And so I think I urge you to do that. And the best way to do that is just to create content. So whatever it is, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Instagram stories, just create content. By creating content, the more content you create, the better you get. I think it's like the quantity brings the quality. I heard somebody say, and now I claim that I came up with it, but yeah, just create lots of content, and that'll build your audience. And then you can figure out how you want to monetize that audience later on, how you want to monetize your influence, later on. Yeah, and then the other thing is really think of building a community, right? So if you're on YouTube, don't just be focused on getting your subscriber numbers up. Just look at building a community. So that may have to happen outside of YouTube. You may have to create a Facebook group or a Slack channel or something, like I have. But really think about the community, because the community can come along with you wherever you go. If you decide you don't want to do YouTube anymore, you just want to do Facebook live streams, then you can tell your community that, and hopefully they'll follow you there. But build a community, create content, build community.
Nice. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and you're doing a great job at that.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
So I'll save the questions to the end here, but
Sure.
What's the best way for someone to reach out to you? Like if they got a lot of value today and want to send you a private message saying thank you, or they want to consume some of your stuff, like where do you want them to go?
Yeah. Head over to YouTube. Head over to my YouTube channel. That's where I upload weekly. I also do a Friday. Every Friday, I do a live stream. It's just straight up Q&A and just subscriber hangout. So you can find me on YouTube. And then if you want to send me a DM, just connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn. That's probably the two easiest places. And please connect with me. Send me your questions. I'll do my best to answer them for you. Or if I can't, I'll direct you to somebody who can.
Awesome. And I've got links to all those in the description, and
Sweet.
I'll have them on the show notes for the episode. Uh, so before tackling these questions here, spoken at my meetup now twice, and you've attended it, and now you're a guest on my podcast. Do you have any like feedback for me? Like, do you have
Yeah.
any? It could be positive, constructive, a combination. Just curious, if you have any feedback for what it is that I'm doing or where things might be headed from your perspective.
Yeah. I think I don't know if you've already thought about it, but I think you need to think of some type of like a gated community. I love the meetup, but someplace where they can get more access to you. I think that would be, not sure where you want to take things, but yeah, I think that's definitely something I would consider if I were you. From what I see, some type of community that's paid, that's gated, where you show up maybe more, smaller group kind of thing. But otherwise, man, you're doing awesome, creating all the content and really fostering that meetup group. I think it's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I guess going off of that, like, do you mind elaborating a little bit on the gated community concept?
Yeah. Some type of membership, I guess, is kind of probably what I'm thinking. Where you show up, they're able to connect with you directly and ask you questions, and where they can interact with each other as well, and more like hands-on practical things as well, one-on-one. So that's probably the next step that I would say.
Okay. Well, thanks for the suggestion and for the feedback.
Yeah, of course.
Cool. So, thanks so much for taking the time, to come here today on the podcast and for the community. I just want to tackle a couple of these questions real quick, and then
Sure.
I'll let you go. So let's see. We've got this one here. Travel gluten-free podcast. Is there a minimum number of keywords you want to use in your description?
Okay, so Rob, using keywords in your YouTube description, minimum number of keywords you want to use. So in the description, the first 200 characters of your description is the most important. Everything else can go below that, like all your affiliate links, all your hashtags and stuff like that. But you want to make sure that the first 200 characters of your description is in line with your title. So let's say your title is how to build influence using Instagram or whatever, and your keyword is how to build influence. You want to use how to build influence in the first 200 characters of your description. If you're talking about tags and the minimum number of tags, I would say there's probably a max. Like, just try to use all 500 characters in the tags. This is actually a question that was in the meetup as well earlier. So yeah. Just try to use all 500 characters in your tags.
Awesome. Thank you. Here's another question that he had. So he said that is it true that embedding YouTube videos into a blog helps SEO? And assuming it does, is it better to embed the code or use like the blog, embed feature if that affects it?
Oh, yeah. That's a good question. I don't know if there's much difference as long as it shows up on your video, on your blog, on your website. So yeah, if you're working with a website, plugin or WordPress or something where you're just able to take the link and then plug it into the website, into some type of widget on the website that makes it show up and embeds the video that way. I'm assuming it's using the same technology and similar code. So I don't know if it really makes a huge difference. So as long as it shows up and the user experience is nice and clean, then I think you're fine. It's probably more of like, what is easier for the the audience to watch it. It's not clunky. So if that's whatever the website tool that you're using allows you to do, or if you just take the embed code, also test it on different browsers, right? Test it on Safari, test it on Chrome, on Firefox, test it on your phone as well, just to make sure that it's responsive, that it doesn't end up being like overblown and super zoomed in, so yeah, that's what I would say. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about whether one or the other, just which one shows up better.
I second all of what Rob said for that one. So Marshall's asking, would you say it's harder to grow now rather than 2016? Assuming he's talking about YouTube here.
Yeah, it's a great question, man. I don't know if I can answer that. I'm not the best guy to answer because I wasn't around YouTube in 2016, to be honest. Like, I mean, I was watching YouTube, but I wasn't a creator on YouTube. I wasn't trying to grow a channel on YouTube. There's a lot. Like, it depends on really. It's just, I guess, all things being equal, I do hear a lot of people saying things were easier back then. It just worked differently. I don't know if it's easier. It just was different.
Yeah, I'd say some of the people I've talked to that were on YouTube back then, um, it's much harder to get your first 1,000 subscribers because less people were there viewing. So they're saying that it's easier today to get the first 1,000, but if you're trying to become one of those whales that has like millions of subscribers, it's much harder starting today to be that whale than if you started in 2016. Is sort of the impression that I get.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the good old days kind of thing. But like, I mean, there's still a lot of, and I mean, from where I sit, I see them all the time. I'm watching for them, like people that are just growing really fast. And they're there, like, Catherine Manning, for example, if you want to look up one example, Content Bug, right? She was like at 2,000 subscribers last year. She's like 250,000 today.
Wow.
Like in a year, she grew to 250,000. So, I mean, if you're creative, you're engaging, you're paying attention to analytics and, you're strategic, you can grow, so, yeah. And YouTube wants new creators, right? I mean, YouTube wants new content, right? So they're always like, they're trying to promote your videos. As long as you try to understand how they work and how YouTube works, then, then your channel will grow.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we got some feedback on what you're suggesting for me. So Marshall's in the meetup, and he said, as being a part of it, I'd say build it a bit larger of a reputation, have like 100+ active members joining weekly before money is involved.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great advice.
Good advice, Marshall. Awesome.
He also said, maybe if you pay as a member, you can ask questions to those who come in to be interviewed.
Yeah.
Which is that's an interesting idea. I like that. Thanks, Marshall. Cool. Well, that's it for the questions here. So,
Sweet.
Rob, thanks so much for spending so much time with us today. It's sort of a marathon doing the back-to-back meetup
No
and
worries.
podcast here.
No worries. Thank you, Jeremy. I love what you're doing, man. And thanks for being an awesome partner at TubeBuddy. And if you need anything, let me know.
Yeah, we'll do. And if you're listening today and you got a bunch of value from Rob, make sure you look him up. He shares a lot of great content on YouTube and on other social medias. Shoot him a PM and just say you heard him on the Why Influence podcast and that you got some value out of today. And if you're looking to grow your influence and grow a personal brand or a community yourself, definitely invite you to join our weekly meetup community. It's an open community. You can go to my website, whyinfluence.com, WHYinfluence.com, and there's a community page, and there you can just sign up for the community, and I'd love to have you join. But otherwise, thanks for listening to this episode entirely, and